1 second. Yes. I'm ready, Zach.
jurors that are seated, would those be the jurors that are the alternates?
Yeah, the last two.
Last two, okay, thanks. In Wisconsin, they still draw them out of a...
Yeah, I heard that.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of killings over there.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. I'm Regina Chu, and I'll be the presiding judge in this trial. Before we get started, I want to start out by thanking you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for interrupting your normal routine. Thank you for fulfilling such an important civic obligation. These are, of course, not normal times. These are extremely trying times. So it is with extra heartfelt appreciation from the entire judicial system that we say thank you for responding to your jury summonses. Upholding the rights we cherish, the right to a trial by jury and the right to a speedy trial, in unusual, trying times is the American way. You validate these constitutional rights by appearing today and by proving your willingness to serve. You jurors are our heroes. You are ordinary people who are called to do extraordinary work to make sure our justice system moves forward, even in the midst of a pandemic. You are upholding the Constitution, the very foundation of our democracy, and we could not do this without you. Not all of us can serve in the military, but what we all can do is do our civic duty by serving as jurors. Our justice system would not work without good citizens like you. I'm saying thank you again because I really can't say thank you enough. As you know, this is a criminal case in which the state of Minnesota has charged the defendant, Kimberly Potter, with the following counts. Count 1 is first-degree manslaughter predicated on reckless use or handling of a firearm, and that count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Daunte Wright while committing the misdemeanor offense of reckless handling or use of a firearm so as to endanger the safety of another with such force and violence that death or grave bodily harm to any person was reasonably foreseeable. Count 2 alleges second-degree manslaughter, and that count alleges that on or about April 11, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, Hennepin County, Minnesota, defendant Kimberly Ann Potter caused the death of Daunte Wright by her culpable negligence, whereby Kimberly Potter created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death or grave bodily harm to Daunte Wright while using or possessing a firearm. The defendant has pleaded not guilty. That plea denies the charges made against her and places upon the state of Minnesota the burden of proving her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The state is represented by Mr. Matt Frank, Ms. Erin Eldridge, and Mr. Josh Larson. And other attorneys involved in the case are Attorney General Keith Ellison and Mr. Raul Shah. The defendant is represented by Mr. Earl Gray, Mr. Paul Eng, and Ms. Amanda Montgomery. And would the defendant please stand? Thank you. I have two clerks that are helping me through this trial, Ms. Jessica Bauer and my law clerk, Mr. Zach Kramer. And they're making sure that all administrative matters are taken care of. If any problems arise, if you're chosen as a juror or you need to get me a message, please let my staff know and they'll make sure the message gets to me. Seated in front of me is Ms. Carly Davis. She is a certified court reporter and she's responsible for keeping an accurate record of the proceedings. That means when you respond to questions, you need to speak loudly and clearly. And if you are asked a question, you have to answer orally with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head or saying uh-huh or uh-uh. Okay? Okay, before we get started here, let me say a couple of things about logistics. First of all, mask wearing. You must wear your mask at all times while you're in the courtroom and in the courthouse generally. The lawyers are also required to wear their masks unless they're at the podium asking you questions. You may remove your mask only when you're in the witness stand and being questioned individually. Let me give you a broad outline of what lawyers call voir dire, which is basically jury selection. I'll give you an idea of what we're going to be doing first. First of all, I'm going to start out with group questions. And if you have a positive response, I want you to raise your hand. Do not answer verbally at this point, okay? After the group questions are done, all of the jurors will be dismissed and we will do you one by one. So I'll start out on the individual questions by doing some follow-up questions on your answers to the questionnaire, and then the attorneys will each have an opportunity to ask questions of you if they have any. Okay, just a couple of points. We can't always control the temperature in the courtroom, so if you're seated as a juror, you will want to dress in layers so that you can put additional clothes on if it's too cold. Also, I want to warn you that there may be delays during the trial. I want to apologize in advance for any delays that might take place. I'm really cognizant of the time that you're taking out of your ordinary lives to serve as a juror, and therefore I try to deal with all legal matters before court starts and or deal with those matters after you leave for the day. But sometimes things come up that nobody anticipated. So I hope you will understand if there are delays. I would suggest that you bring something to read so that you're occupied should there be any delays, and obviously I'll try to keep those down as much as possible. Please understand that the attorneys and I will make every effort to keep the case proceeding, but there may be matters regarding questions of law that must be handled in chambers or when you're not here. And this is to make sure that only the proper evidence is submitted to you for your consideration in rendering your verdict. Okay, I'm going to give you some rules of law that apply in a criminal case at this point. A complaint is not evidence. It creates no inference or presumption of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way be prejudiced against the defendant because a complaint has been filed against her or because the defendant is on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent. In order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt. The defendant does not have to prove innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant unless and until the state has proven her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by evidence admitted in this trial. A common misperception of the American criminal justice system is that the jury determines whether the defendant or the accused person is guilty or innocent. That is not what American juries do. There is no such thing as an innocent verdict under American criminal law. The jury's verdict is either guilty or not guilty. Guilty means proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Not guilty means not proved beyond a reasonable doubt. To ensure that both the state and the defendant receive a fair trial by an impartial jury, it'll be necessary for me and the attorneys to ask you questions. Remember that you will be under oath when you answer the questions and that you must answer truthfully. The questioning that will take place is a really important part of the process. That's because all of us hold personal opinions, and all of us have had things happen to us. The purpose of jury selection is to try to determine whether or not you hold certain opinions so strongly, or whether something has happened to someone near and dear to you that would make it impossible for you to be fair to both sides in this case, that would prevent you from listening to the evidence and making your decision solely on the evidence presented along with your common sense. Please don't take any offense to the questions that are going to be asked. The purpose is not to pry into your personal affairs. Our sole purpose and our obligation is to ensure that the jurors who decide this case are neutral, open-minded, and fair. Neutral means that before you hear all the evidence, you're not leaning one way or the other on the question of whether the state has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Open-minded means that you're willing to listen and consider all of the evidence, and fair means that you will base your verdict on the evidence in this case and not on anything that is not presented in this case. We want you to bring your common sense into the jury room, but your verdict must be based on the evidence you hear during the trial. Your obligation is to answer the questions and tell us of anything, even if you're not asked, that might affect your ability to be fair, open-minded, and neutral. Now, some of you who are questioned may be excused. Please don't take any offense to this. I hope you will understand if that happens. At this point, members of the panel, I'd like you to stand up and raise your right hand and face my law clerk while he administers the oath.
Do you affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror? If so, please say, I do.
Okay, please be seated. Okay, panel members, I'm going to start with the group questions. And again, just to remind you, don't answer orally, just raise your hand. Does anyone on this panel have any serious concerns for their health because of serving as a juror in this case? Please raise your hand. Okay, no hands were raised. Our system of law presumes the defendant innocent of the charges against her unless and until she has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden of proof is on the state. the defendant does not have to prove her innocence, and she is presumed innocent. Do you accept the principle that the defendant is presumed innocent and that the state has a burden of proof? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Does anyone disagree with that principle? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. If you serve as a juror, I will instruct you as to the law. You must follow the law as I give it to you, even if you believe the law is or should be different. Are you willing to do this? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. If you are chosen as a juror, I will instruct you that proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Does anyone disagree with this principle of law? If so, please raise your hand. No hands are raised. In arriving at your verdict, if you sit as a juror, the subject of penalty or punishment is not to be discussed or considered by you. This is a matter that lies solely with the court and within the limits prescribed by law. The subject of penalty or punishment must not in any way affect your decision as to whether or not the state has proven the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Are you willing to follow this instruction? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Under our system of justice, the jury must decide the case solely on the evidence produced in court and the law that the judge instructs, and not because of bias, passion, prejudice, or sympathy. Would you be able to follow that principle of law? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Now, there will be police officers who will testify in this case, as well as other witnesses. I am going to give you some guidelines in determining whether a witness is believable or not believable. It's basically a matter of common sense, but things to look at are: how did the witness appear? Did he or she seem honest and sincere? Will the witness gain or lose if the case is decided a certain way? Was the witness's testimony consistent with other evidence in the case? What is the witness's relationship to the parties? Would you be able to use these guidelines in deciding the credibility of a police officer just as you would any other witness? If so, please raise your hand. All hands are raised. Is there anyone here who would automatically believe the testimony of a police officer just because he or she is law enforcement? Please raise your hand. No hands are raised. Is there anyone here who would totally discount the testimony of a peace officer just because of his or her position? No hands are raised. All right, I've introduced to you the attorneys in this case and the defendant. Do any of you know the attorneys or the defendant? No hands are raised. Okay, earlier you were giving a list of possible witnesses. They may not all testify. What I'd like you to do is raise your hand if you know any of the witnesses on the list, and I'd like you to raise your hand even if you're not sure. Okay, no hands are raised. Okay. We expect to start opening statements by December 8th. We may start a little earlier, but that's our expectation at this point. And we further expect to be finished with everything by Christmas Eve. That's our best estimate. Don't be concerned if we do not finish by Christmas Eve. I intend to take Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve weekend off, no matter what, and we'll start December 27 if we are not done. So I don't worry about missing Christmas with your family and friends. If you're chosen as a juror, I'll just give you an idea of what the time will be. We'll normally start at 9 o'clock and conclude about 4:30 or 5. There'll be a 20-minute break in the morning, a 20-minute break in the afternoon, and we typically take a lunch break for an hour, about 12:30 to 1:30. Please remember that you must not talk to anyone involved in this case, nor should you discuss this case among yourselves. During the recess, you may see the attorneys or the parties in the hallways. Don't take offense if they don't stop and say hello or talk to you. Everyone involved in this case has been ordered to have no contact or communication with any member of the jury panel. Any violation of that order could jeopardize the trial, and this prohibition will continue until a verdict has been rendered. All right. At this point, we're going to start individual voir dire. So I'm going to ask that other than juror number 25, the other jurors may follow the deputy back to the courtroom waiting room. Okay, Ms. 25, can you come up here, please? And you can take the seat right next to me in the jury box or the witness box. And could you please remove your mask? How are you doing today? Okay. This shouldn't take long. A couple of follow-up questions. You said that you had a somewhat negative general impression of defendant Kimberly Potter. My question to you is, can you base your decision only on the testimony and the evidence in this case and set aside any prior general impressions that you have of the defendant?
Yes.
And as Ms. Potter sits here today, can you give her the presumption of innocence?
Yes.
Okay. In response to the question, do you believe our criminal justice system works? You said, I think sentencing and verdict should be unbiased and equal, despite race or gender. I'm responsible for sentencing,
Right.
okay? Will you keep that out of the jury room? Any discussion about that if you're chosen as a juror?
Yes.
Okay. So you won't let that affect your decision as to whether or not you decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty?
Right.
Okay. It's encouraging to see that you're looking forward to having the experience of serving as a juror?
I feel like I've sort of reflected on it a little bit more since answering, and I didn't mean to sound naive in my answer previously. I think I've reflected and sort of taken in the weight of the trial a little bit and understand the importance of it. I don't think that I would like to be on the jury, but I will serve if I am asked.
Okay. So, if the parties chose you as a juror in the case, you would be willing to serve?
I would.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything that we should know about you that wasn't on the questionnaire that you think might affect your ability to be fair and impartial to both sides?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. All right, now the lawyers have a chance to ask questions.
Good afternoon,
Hello.
Miss 25. That's your number.
Yes.
I'm Earl Gray, Pauline, and my client, our client, and Amanda Montgomery's back there. We're representing Ms. Potter. And I'm going to ask you some questions pertaining to the answers you made in your questionnaire. And that was a couple months ago, was it?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Do you have any memory of what you said in here?
Vaguely.
Okay. Starting out, you were asked what information you had from media reports, and you wrote a rather extensive statement. Was that based on what you read and that you saw the video?
Correct.
Okay, and how many times did you see the video?
2 or 3.
2 or 3? And you based your description of the incident on the video and what you read, correct?
Correct.
And in what you read, you write, Kimberly Potter fired her gun, shooting Daunte Wright. She alleged, and alleged is underlined, that she tried to fire her taser, but fired her gun by mistake. Why did you have alleged underlined?
I guess I just didn't want to say that was a fact. I know that that's what she alleged. I guess I was just trying to highlight the proper verbiage. I didn't want to say that she did or didn't.
And you saw the video a couple, 3 times?
Yeah.
Did you hear the video? The yelling taser, taser?
I couldn't quite tell what she was saying. It sounded like taser.
I see. In this case, there's a presumption of innocence. And what that means is you must presume that Kim Potter is innocent of this charge. Can you do that?
Yes, I think so.
Well, it's a little bit different than reading the newspaper or watching a video. On that, you jump to the conclusion, well, they got her. She's had it. She's guilty. And that's not what you do in this courtroom. You do the direct opposite. You presume that she's innocent, and that isn't not guilty. That's innocent. Do you understand that you have to do that?
Yes.
And it's a very different thinking than you usually do?
Yes.
Okay. You also find that our client is your somewhat negative impression of her. Could you leave that somewhat negative impression outside the courtroom, and when you come in here, be objective and presume her innocent?
Yes, I think so.
Excuse me?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Well, you are the one that know about yourself, and you should be able to know if you can either presume her innocent and not have a somewhat negative attitude or not. I think so. Can you or can't you?
I can.
Okay, thank you. And I do not believe Daunte Wright should have been killed. I don't think she intended to kill him, but she should have realized that she drew her firearm. Can you take that outside the courtroom too and rely on just what you hear in here?
Yes.
Then you have you got somewhat negative on her, and you're going to presume her innocence. But then when we get to Mr. Wright, you're neutral on him, and you state, "I've read stories that he's had several run-ins with the law before. I think the media's view on him is that he is a criminal, which might be true, but he was young and had time to change and get better." Was your attitude that way back then, as far as you were concerned about him?
Yes.
You read information in the newspaper, I suppose, or online, or wherever you read that material. And although it said that he was a criminal, you didn't care. He was young and he didn't deserve to be killed.
Correct. I think just because somebody commits a crime doesn't mean
Excuse me?
I just believe that just because somebody committed a crime doesn't mean that that they're a bad person.
Some of those beliefs, if you learn in this case that if somebody commits a crime, law enforcement may have the right to pursue that person or stop that person from committing the crime. Do you disagree with that?
No, I agree with that statement.
Okay. And on some occasions, as you experienced during your lifetime and read, people commit crimes and end up dead because of that. You understand that?
I understand that, yes.
And you don't agree with that, though?
I believe that everybody deserves a chance. Like I said, I don't think that committing a crime makes you a bad person. I think that I guess I just believe that everybody deserves the opportunity to correct their actions.
Okay. In a situation of an emergency situation that a police officer faces, an exigent circumstance, and there's no time to think, do you understand what I'm talking about when I say that about police officers?
I'm going to object to that, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. You do understand, based on your life experiences and your reading and everything, that police officers on occasion have very little time to think, and they're put in an emergency or an exigent circumstance.
The objection is sustained.
Okay. And what you also say, and don't mean to put you on the spot, what we're attempting to do here is to get a fair and impartial jury for our client and for the state, actually.
Yes, I understand.
And I hope you understand that, because
I do.
there are two important decisions to be made by a juror. One is guilt or not guilty. But the other one is whether or not at this juncture you know enough about yourself to know whether you can be fair and impartial against the defendant and fair and impartial for the state, and not favor one side or the other when you get into this jury trial. Do you understand that?
I understand.
And are you able to be fair and impartial? Or do you
Yes.
have some beliefs that you express in this questionnaire that seem to indicate, for example, I don't think he should have been shot, no matter if he was guilty of a crime or not. Police should use non-lethal methods of force. And was that your opinion back then?
Yes, it still
And
is.
is that your opinion today?
It is.
And going back to the back of your questionnaire, actually, let's just go to the last page. You state, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? Yes. I've never served as a juror before, and it would be an experience I'd love to have. But then you say, I think the case is very important and relevant to the issues our community and country are facing. Well, do you realize if you sit on this jury, the issues our country is facing about riots and protests are not an issue in this case. This case is a criminal case, the state of Minnesota against my client, Kim Potter. The other stuff you have to leave outside the courtroom. And are you willing to do that? You really think you can do that?
I do. As I stated previously, I think that I've had time to reflect on my willingness to serve on the jury, and at this point I feel like I would rather not, simply because I do understand the weight that this trial holds and the importance of it, and I just frankly don't want to be in the middle of it.
Okay. Your Honor, may I talk with counsel? So do we have to put on the earphones, Judge? Ms. 25, I have a few more questions. Knowing what you know about yourself, do you feel that you would have a bias in this case in favor of Daunte Wright and people that have been shot and killed by the police?
I think that I might be leaning that way, yes.
Thank you. Same, Your Honor.
Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for your honesty in answering questions. I'm going to excuse you from this jury. Okay? All right, thank you. Deputy, could you hold up 1 second before the next juror comes in? Okay, for the record, I granted the for cause request of the defendant. It was based on her answer to the last question. She admitted that she would lean toward the defendant, or toward Mr. Wright's position, and other young men that have been injured by police officers. So that motion was granted. Are you ready for the next juror? Okay. Mr. 26, please take a seat. And would you please remove your mask? All right, thank you for answering the questions on the questionnaire. Just a couple follow-up questions. Okay, you indicated in one of your answers that the place where you worked did suffer damage during one of the demonstrations. Okay. Now, my question is this. Were you working at the time when it happened?
Not at the place that was damaged.
Okay. But it was close to where you work, is that right? All right. And how did that make you feel?
Angry,
Okay.
upset.
Can you explain how you felt and why?
I was angry and upset because I felt that some of the actions were not necessarily related to why the protests were happening at the time. So particularly with a lot of the damage that occurred, I didn't necessarily equate the two with the protests that were happening and with the actions that were happening as well. So I felt that it wasn't connected and that the protests were being taken advantage of in that sense.
Okay, so I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but that certain people involved in some of the property damage really didn't have racial justice issues in mind. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if you're chosen as a juror in this case, can you put aside any anger about the demonstrations that occurred and just listen to the evidence and decide whether or not the state has proven its case against Ms. Potter based on the evidence alone and not on any concerns that there'll be further demonstrations?
I will do my best.
I think I need a more positive response to that. If I instruct you that you are to just base your decision solely on the evidence in this case and the law that I give it to you, would you follow that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. You indicated that you have a professional presentation that you have to do for Sunday, December 5. Okay, you'll be able to do that. Okay, just so you don't have any concern about that. We will not be in session on December 5. And good luck, by the way.
Thank you.
In response to the question, do you want to serve as a juror in this case, you responded no. Can you tell me why, and if you still feel that way?
I do still feel that way. I have a lot of friends and family that are very opinionated in the matter. I personally feel like I'm someone that could put my biases aside, but I do have a lot of those influences around me. And as much as it could matter, I have job interviews, and I'm currently finishing up a degree, so I'll have finals coming up soon. This is from what I gathered at the time that I answered these questions, that the timing would not necessarily help my current career and my trajectory, and that it would actually hinder that, which is why I answered that question that way.
All right. When are your finals?
Over the next 2-3 weeks.
Okay. And will you be able to delay taking your finals?
I think there might be one that I might be able to delay because it's more of a project-based final, but the other two are in person. So I will need to be there for that.
Okay.
Yep.
When are the in-person interviews?
In 2 weeks. Oh, in the interviews.
Well, where you have to be there in person. When are those scheduled?
In
for?
2 weeks.
Okay. And are you able to reschedule those, or the one interview?
I could do my best.
Okay. Is there anything right now that makes you think that they would not reschedule that?
Nothing that I know of right now.
Okay. You indicated that this is a very public trial and that you're a private person. And is that one of your concerns?
Yes, that
Okay.
certainly is.
If the parties chose you as a juror, would you be willing to serve?
Yes, I believe it's a civic duty as a citizen.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, counsel?
Good afternoon. Number 26. You have a number, not a name. Since you've completed this interview, written questionnaire a couple of months ago, is there anything that has changed in this, or is this about the same as it was back then?
That is about the same as it was back
Okay.
then.
And is there anything else we should know about that wasn't covered in the questionnaire in our selection of you as a juror or non-juror?
No, not to my knowledge.
And basically, you say in here that you will follow the law as the judge gives it,
That is correct.
and listen to the evidence and look at the exhibits and come to a conclusion at the end of the case, correct?
That is correct.
And I take it you're the type of person to wait till you hear all of the evidence, including our evidence, before you come to any conclusion, since you are what the job you do have.
That is correct.
Okay. And can you think of any reason why you would not be fair and impartial in this case?
Not at this time.
I realize you have some people that might know about this that are your relatives. Can you handle that if some of them are very opinionated one way or the other?
Yes, I certainly can.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Pastor Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Frank,
Good afternoon, number 26. Sorry, that's rather impersonal, but just the way we're using it and doing it in this case, so sorry about that. I come third after you've already been asked a lot of questions, so I probably won't have many to ask you about either. And I'm just going to try to follow up on a couple of things. Sounds like any contact that you have with law enforcement is more in passing at work, essentially.
Correct.
You don't go on ride-alongs or anything of that nature. You
No.
just see them in the building. And you, when you were asked about your impression of Ms. Potter, you indicated that she realized she fired her firearm instead of her taser immediately and turned herself in. Where did you get that information from? Do you recall?
So everything I know about this case has been what was covered in the media.
And was that some time ago or recently?
This was, I believe, right after this had happened, and details about what had happened were starting to come out in the media.
So quite a long time ago, actually, right?
Yes.
And just seeing it on the media, you didn't go out and track it down and read everything you could on it?
Not on this particular case, no.
And so that impression that you have at the time is not something you're so committed to now you couldn't set it aside.
Correct.
You realize that's not evidence, right?
Correct.
And as a juror, the decision you make, as the judge said, is to decide it based only on the evidence in court.
Correct.
You think, you've probably said this probably 3 times now, but you feel you can do that for sure.
Yes, I believe so.
You were asked in the questions about the organizations Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And were you familiar with both of those organizations?
Yes.
Okay. And you wrote the same answer for your opinions of both, or impressions of both. Do you recall doing that?
I vaguely remember doing that, yes.
I mean, you essentially wrote Black Lives Matter as a way for members to voice their opinions, and then essentially the same thing about Blue Lives Matter. Can you just explain for us a little bit why you answered it that way?
So I answered it in that way because I believe that everybody is entitled to their opinions and what they believe in. And that really isn't different no matter what you call the movement.
So you see those organizations as a way for those members that want to be a part of them can have a voice to the community.
Correct, just like any other organization.
Okay. And you have a brother in the Marine Corps?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you see him very much, or is he
Intermittently.
he's actively deployed? I don't know what the proper terminology would be, but
He is not currently, but he was before.
are you close with him?
Yes.
Talk to him a lot about being a Marine?
Less about our jobs and more about our personal lives.
So it's not a big aspect of your relationship with your brother. It's not a strong connection you have. It's just his job and your job.
Correct.
I think you candidly admitted to us that we always appreciate any questionnaires that you're a private person. We certainly respect that. And one of the things a juror has to do, well, it's kind of an odd job, because in one sense you make a personal decision, right? You consider the evidence and evaluate that evidence for yourself. But then you also have to go in a room and discuss that, deliberate. That's why we call it deliberations with others. Think you'd have any trouble being a part of a process like that with others?
No, I would not.
If you had opinions about evidence, you're willing to share those with others and consider what they say as well.
Yes, I can certainly do that.
An important part of jury service, isn't it? And the friends and family that have strong opinions around you, you indicated you would have no trouble. You could handle that. Of course, if you're a juror, you can't talk about the case at all while it's going on. No trouble following that.
Correct.
And do you have any concern about whatever decision you make in the case, the jury makes in the case, how that might affect you and those relationships later? Do you have any concerns about that?
Some concern.
Yeah.
I can't absolutely say that there's no concern.
Yeah. Would you still be able to fairly decide the case?
I believe so.
Decide the case and then deal with those issues later.
Everybody has their opinions.
Okay. Can you excuse me just for a moment, please?
Yep.
Mayor, excuse me, please. Thank you, Juror 26. I have no further questions, Your Honor. We would pass the juror.
Pass, please.
Yes.
Okay. You will be a juror in this case, okay? And we expect to start on December 8th. We may start earlier, but right now it's December 8th. You will be getting a call from the jury office telling you when to report and what time and where, all right? In the meantime, have a good day and a good evening, all right? And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, juror number 28. Good afternoon. Please be seated, and could you remove your mask, please? Thank you. All right, I don't have very many questions for you, okay? You did say that you would find it moderately difficult to look at graphic photographs, including photos and videos of a person who's died. If you're chosen as a juror, would you do it even though you would find it difficult?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to serve as a juror on this case?
I would fill out my duty.
Okay. You indicated on your questionnaire that you weren't sure, but you would serve if the parties chose you.
Yes.
Okay. And I realize it's a commitment and that it takes you away from your family and your personal life. So thank you for your willingness to serve. Go ahead, counsel.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Lang. I'm one of the lawyers for Officer Potter, Earl Gray, Amanda Montgomery. I have an opportunity to ask you some questions. That's how the process works. Okay. You filled out the questionnaire, and we appreciate that, and I've read it. And I had a couple questions about it for you. And the first question appears on page 3. It asks you what you remember about this, and you said, I quote, so I can refresh your memory here, Daunte Wright was fatally shot by Kim Potter during a traffic stop. Question as confusion if a taser was grabbed versus a gun. That's not, I think I've got it right, but I'm close.
Yes, that sounds right.
And how did you come to that conclusion upon what you saw?
Just media coverage.
And what kind of media coverage did you see?
Oh, a long time ago, I don't recall, but it was just whatever was on maybe Fox News or whatever might have been playing out. Recalled a specific source of the media.
Okay. All right. And you have neutral opinions of both Officer Potter and Daunte Wright at this point. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, and you're not making any judgments one way or another.
No.
You realize, of course, that Officer Potter is presumed innocent.
Correct.
And she will be testifying at the trial, and if you are chosen, we would want you to wait to hear from her before you make any decisions. You're, I think, willing to do that, but you got to tell me one way or another.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you're willing to wait it out and hear everything.
Yes.
So we've got her testimony and some other testimony coming.
Yes.
Fair enough? Okay. And you've also talked about Daunte Wright's death with your family and friends, according to this.
Yes.
And it's, you indicate that it was most unfortunate,
Yes.
which it is, of course.
I'm sorry.
And you still, of course, feel that way, but any early death is most unfortunate.
Yes.
Okay. And no one's disputing that.
I'm sorry.
No one is disputing that.
Yes.
Okay. And you also feel that the community was negatively impacted by the demonstrations and the riots because of the personal property damage. Is that right?
Correct.
And you still feel that way?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You also suffered, you were a victim of a crime. A car was broken into. Is it your car?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you were somewhat satisfied with the police? Did they solve the crime?
Yes.
Okay. They found the person?
Yes.
Were you pleased or at least satisfied with how that case was resolved?
Please.
Was that person charged, if you remember?
I believe so.
Okay. Then you were asked a series of questions in 7, and you strongly agreed with the idea the police in my community make me feel safe, correct?
Yes.
And you would oppose defunding the police.
Yes.
Okay. And then you have some neutral, no opinions about a lot of the questions, too. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the one thing you're concerned about, or not one thing, but you're uncomfortable with photographs and seeing photographs from the case. Did I hear you right?
I would say moderate. Right.
Moderately concerned?
Yeah, not impairing.
Okay. So I think I may have missed that exchange with Judge Chu. So there are always photographs in a case like this. We'll try to minimize them for you, but the fact that there are some photographs, you can survive that.
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me what your master's degree is in?
Business.
Okay. Where was it from?
Madison.
Okay. Are you from Wisconsin?
No.
And can you tell me what a procurement officer does? I have a hunch I know, but I want you to explain it for me.
I'm responsible for kind of the strategic contractual arrangements between our company and our suppliers, and also procuring that material for manufacturing.
So you're a busy guy right now, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
You're experiencing the same supply problems that most people are.
Yes, sir.
And your questionnaire is quite short, so I'm almost at the end here. The last question is that, do you want to serve as a juror? I mean, it's a weighty responsibility, you would agree. And you said you weren't sure, but you're willing to do it.
I'm willing to do it.
And you're qualified to do it, and you'll be fair.
Yes.
And you'll call it as you see it, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yes.
Okay. Just a second. Thanks for answering my questions. We pass this juror.
Counsel? Mr. Frank?
Good afternoon, Juror 28. I apologize for just using a number, but that's how we're running the system here. So Mr. Eng helped me out there by asking what a chief procurement officer does. I thought I had that similar sense of what it was, but and I didn't even think about at the time all these supply chain issues we keep hearing about, if that's even the right term. So it does make me wonder just how busy are you? And let me back up, because I think what the judge said earlier is, we're not here to pry into your personal life, and I apologize for that, but these are just kind of things that we have to know. We know this is going to be a lengthy trial, as trials go. Could go right up to Christmas Eve, or as the judge mentioned, maybe even after. And, so we have to ask you, because you're the only one that can tell us, how busy are you? How is this going to affect your life, your work life?
I would say, I hate to sound selfish, but I would say extraordinarily busy right now. Challenging times, obviously, for all of us as we're heading into the seasons, but it's life, right? So we have to balance those things.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. Like, only you can tell us. It's not being selfish, right? It's being appropriate with us, and because we have to ask. The two concerns are, that you're going to miss work at a time that you just can't afford it financially or just work-wise, right? And when you sit, here as a juror, you got to be able to pay attention rather than being worried about work or having to go in at night. Would you have to do anything like that where you'd go in at night and catch up?
If I'm allowed to, I'll certainly need to work at night to catch up.
Yeah, we won't. Well, I shouldn't speak for the judge, but typically, when we're done with court at the end of the day, you're free to go. But I mean, that does raise the question: if you're going to be going to work at night to catch up, how much sleep are you going to get and be sharp in the morning? You know what I mean?
Not to the point of deprivation, for sure. I'm certainly not going to put my personal health at risk. So. Is
it going to cause you personal stress at all to be having to swing double duty during that time?
Certainly, to some degree, yes.
Okay. And I don't want you to tell me the name of your business, but it sounds like manufacturing.
Yes.
And so is the time of year, the end of the year holidays, make your company busier?
I would say steady state at this time of year.
So it's really just the supply chain issues.
Yes, sir.
The cargo ships sitting out in the bay, right? So, I guess I'm trying not to repeat myself, but I just want to know, for you, do you think you can give us that kind of commitment to be here day in and day out for 2-3 weeks and be able to pay attention? You're the only one.
Answer.
You can go ahead and ask the question.
So, given everything we've discussed, do you think you can make that kind of commitment, or is this just not the right case for you?
I can make that commitment. I'll strive that balance.
Okay. You indicate in your questionnaire, in the answer you gave, there was a sensitive time for all in Minneapolis. Do you remember writing that?
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
I'm sorry.
What did you mean by that?
That is a sensitive time?
Yeah.
These are just trying times for all of us, I think, both with COVID and just the challenges that we've had in the Twin Cities over the last year.
Okay. And you're referring to the challenges from the demonstrations and the protests, that kind of stuff, do you mean?
In a broader context as well. I just think that COVID has also been challenging for everybody.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think anybody will dispute that, right? COVID has been tough, right? Continues to be tough. We're talking through, 2 layers of plexiglass, and yeah. There's a question a few more down that deals with, how the demonstrations have affected the community, and you point out the damage to personal property and the harm to people. Is that the most striking thing that you recall, or that you think is the impact from those?
Those are the things that stood out, I think, for me personally, yes.
Think there's anything positive that came out of those?
I think there's something positive that comes out of every situation.
Okay. What kind of, can you think of anything with regard to the demonstrations that it would be positive to come out of?
I think folks having an opportunity to have a voice and that voice being heard is always a positive thing.
And of course there were similar things involved after this death occurred. Do you recall hearing about that?
A little bit, to be honest. I started to tune out a little bit of some of the noise in the media. A little bit bipolar, so sometimes it was hard to form a clear opinion about what was going on.
Okay. And again, not trying to pry, but it just the way you said that it makes me want to ask you, why tune out? Right?
I just try to be open-minded about trying to understand where the truth of a situation is. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes our media has a tendency to be very bipolar in its opinions about things.
And you've sort of been asked about this already too, I think, and you understand that what you hear in the media is not evidence of a crime.
Correct.
Well, that's not the right way to say that. It's not evidence here in the courtroom, right? And as a juror, you can only go on what you hear here in the courtroom.
Correct.
And so, kind of knowing about the demonstrations and the negative things about it, do you think you can set that aside?
Yes.
In those questions, Mr. Ng kind of quickly led you through. You said people in my community, I'm sorry, let me start over. Police in my community make me feel safe. And you said you strongly agree with that. Why did you choose strongly agree?
Because that's the way I feel. I feel like they're there and they provide a purpose and they provide safety.
Okay. And the next statement is I support defunding the police, and you said I strongly disagree.
Correct.
So it's sort of, two sides of the same thing, right? That you want the police there, you feel strongly about having them to make you feel safe.
Correct.
And then you also strongly disagree with the statement, I do not trust the police.
Correct.
So you have a lot of trust in them, and you want them there for you, correct?
Correct.
And it's partly to sort of deal with some of the negative stuff that came out of the demonstrations, the property damage and the harm to people, right?
Partly.
Yeah. And with many of those other questions, you chose no opinion. Do you remember why? The questions about how police deal with people. You said you had no opinion about that. Do you remember why?
I didn't have a strong opinion one way or another on those questions.
Okay. I mean, do you think that discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you put no opinion?
Kind of to my prior point about being a little careful about what I believe in the media.
Okay. So I was aimed more at the media as a reliable source of information, maybe.
I think it's a source of information, is not the only source of information.
You indicate there's a statement about police treating black and white people similarly, and you said no opinion on that. You remember why you took no opinion, or selected the no opinion option there?
I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that they treat them differently than they would anybody else.
One of the good things, of course, about the demonstrations was giving voice to that, and kind of part of what Black Lives Matter is trying to give voice to, right? Would you think that at all is I don't know how to say this, that it's just something you haven't seen personally, so you can't offer an opinion on it, or?
I've seen it personally. I'm not sure that it changes an opinion one way or another. I still feel neutral about the police protecting people equally.
Okay. And that means all people.
I'm sorry?
That means protecting all people equally.
Correct.
And some people say the Black Lives Matter movement is about equality, right? That Black Lives Matter too. And do you understand that that's sort of what part of their message is?
Yes.
Okay. And you think that's a valid point?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And so when it came to evaluating evidence in a courtroom, black, white, doesn't matter.
Correct.
When you, I know you have, you were asked a question, one of the statements in that is about people today do not give our law enforcement officers the respect they deserve. And you chose no opinion for that too. Do you recall why?
Yes.
Why is that?
I know that I had a strong opinion one way or another on that statement.
Okay. Do you think you give them the respect they deserve?
I would hope so.
What does that mean to you when you say that you give them the respect they deserve? What does that mean?
That I respect the position that they hold. I try to support them in a position that they hold. I respect their opinion. I try to honor their request if they're asked something of me.
Are they capable of doing things wrong?
Sure, they're humans.
And as a juror, would you be able to judge the actions of a police officer in a courtroom just like anybody else's?
Yes.
Kind of, tying back to that notion of strongly disagreeing with the statement, I do not trust the police. So we've got that double negative there, but essentially you trust the police, right?
Correct.
And yet do you think you can, despite having that trust in them, evaluate a police officer's actions in a courtroom just like anybody else?
Yes.
An argumentative, asked and answered at this point.
Well, I'll let you answer. Go ahead. I think you answered already.
Yeah.
I did, sorry.
Okay. All right, you can move on, Mr. Frank.
You indicate you have, sounds like you're a hunter.
Yes.
And so you have hunting rifles, shotguns, I assume.
Correct.
And have you ever taken, safety classes for that purpose?
It's required by law in some states to hunt.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have asked you that way. So it was like, no, I never did that. But you've done that.
Yes.
How long have you been a hunter?
Over 40 years, probably.
So lifetime thing.
Yes.
Do it with your family before?
Yes.
And pretty important to you?
Yes.
Can you excuse me just for a second? I want to, Your Honor, may I have a moment, please?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Juror 28. Your Honor, we would exercise a peremptory.
Thank you so much, but you're excused from this jury panel. So you're done with jury service, but I really appreciate you showing up. Okay, thank you. Okay, Counsel, we're going to take our afternoon break, okay? Yes. I think I only suggested that you look at it. She must have had her baby by now. She had indicated number 30 was vomiting and very pregnant at the time she responded to her questionnaire, but she's probably not in that state right now. Okay. Let's see, we are on number 30. Could I get my computer going first? Oh, yes. You ready, counsel? Okay, we're ready, Deputy. Thank you. Hello, Miss 30. Please have a seat. And you may remove your mask. Okay, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Thank you for being so patient. You're one of our last jurors today. I just have a couple of questions, okay? Now, you said on the questionnaire that you had a somewhat negative general impression of the defendant, and I am wondering whether or not you can promise to base, if you're chosen as a juror, if you can promise to render your verdict, whether guilty or not guilty, based solely on the evidence that you hear in this case and not on any general impressions that you may have of defendant or Mr. Wright. Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay. And you can do that. You can also not base your verdict on anything that you heard before the case started.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You stated that you live in on the south side of Minneapolis.
Yes.
A lot of places in the community have been affected by police-related killings. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, mainly what I was talking about is the George Floyd situation that happened, and
Okay.
that's really affected the Southside community.
Okay, and I think I know the answer, but in what way, in your view?
Well, yeah, a lot of people have negative, viewings of the police, but I think it's a worldwide issue that has pretty much, come up recently with a lot of people of color, being killed by police and brutality and whatnot.
Okay. What is your general impression of police?
I know that police, not every officer is bad or racist or, out to go kill somebody of color, but I definitely do think that there could be a relation to that.
Okay, so you recognize that there are some cops that do bad things and other cops that don't, and
Yeah.
each person in law enforcement should be judged on an individual basis. Do you
Right.
agree with that statement?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You stated that you or your family have been victims of crimes, and I'm wondering what their police interactions were with respect to those crimes. First of all, did they report the crimes to the police?
Over the years, there's been so many different interactions, but the ones off the top of my head, yeah, they have been reported to police.
And what was the reaction that they had to how the police handled the situation? Satisfied, not satisfied?
There's
or
certain
neutral?
situations that they were satisfied, others that they weren't. Things that, like, it's out of the officer's hands sometimes. It's just the law and what they can do, what they can enforce.
Okay. Have any of those interactions with police in those circumstances make you biased against police officers in general?
No. Like
Okay.
I said, I know that certain officers can be like that and others aren't.
Okay. Have you personally had any negative interactions with police?
No.
Okay. You stated that your uncle's been tased. Can you tell me a little bit about the circumstances there?
He's always, all his life, he's been on and off hard drugs, and he's had different interactions, different problems when it comes to, like, his mental health. And on one specific occasion, he was, like, threatening to commit suicide, and I'm pretty sure, like, he got tased, like, off of a bridge or something like that.
Okay.
For his own safety,
All right.
so he didn't hurt himself.
All right. Were you critical at all of how the police handled that situation?
No, I didn't. I mean, I wasn't involved personally, so I didn't feel no way about it. I know how he can be, and I understand, like, the circumstances.
Is there anything about that situation that makes you think you shouldn't be a juror in this case?
No.
Okay. You check the box that some family members have been accused of crimes. Do you feel that in those situations justice was done?
For the most part.
Okay. Are there any situations where you did not believe that justice was done? And if so, can you explain?
There's just been certain situations where, like I said, it wasn't handled the way that we would have liked it to be handled, but at the same time, it wasn't always, like, an officer's fault. It could have been the law, and, like, that's just what they could do and couldn't do.
Could you elaborate on that situation?
Yeah, so there's been, like, one time, I had a family member who had, like, gotten into a physical altercation with somebody, and they were kind of trying to explain their side of the story, but other people were kind of jumping in, trying to explain theirs, and the officers just weren't really trying to hear it because of, like, the interruptions. They only wanted the one person to talk, and they pretty much just left the situation because of they kept warning the people around to like not interrupt and, like, to mind their own business, and they didn't, so they pretty much left, which,
Okay.
I mean, I feel they shouldn't have just left, but I guess I understand.
All right. When you filled, I'm sorry, I'm going to be asking these personal questions.
No,
Okay. When you filled out your questionnaire, you were pregnant and you were having severe vomiting and nausea.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to ask you this, but are you still pregnant?
Yes.
Okay.
I am.
And are you still having severe vomiting and nausea?
Yeah, and throughout my whole pregnancy, I've, like, at times had to, like, go to the ER and check into the hospital because it just gets so bad that there's nothing medicine or really anything can do.
Okay. How often does this happen where you feel nauseous and you feel like vomiting?
Well, that happens every day, multiple times throughout the day, but where it's gotten to the point that, like, I've had to go into the ER, it's been about maybe 6 times.
Okay. When's the last time you had to go to the ER?
I believe it was at the end of October.
Okay. Do you think that, given your present problems with your pregnancy, that you'd be able to sit as a juror in this case?
Well, I think for the most part I can. I felt the need to put that in there because it's for my life it's been unpredictable. So it's not like I can, specifically say like, there could be a day that like I'm not available, or I have, I'm in the hospital. So.
Okay. How often do you feel nauseous during a week or a month?
Well, like I said, every day, multiple times a day. I just do the best I can to manage it. Like, there's only so much I can do. But, and then I would say that in an instance where I can't keep anything down and I have to be on IV fluids, that's happens like, I'm about to be 7 months. So if it's happened about 6 times, it's been maybe, once a month.
Okay. And it's unpredictable, you said,
Yeah.
when you feel that way.
Yep.
Let me tell you what the schedule is. I think I told you it was 9 to about 4:30 with 20-minute breaks in the morning and 20-minute break in the afternoon, and a lunch break of about an hour. Is that schedule going to present a problem for you?
No, it shouldn't.
Okay. But you're still thinking that it's unpredictable when you feel well enough to come in?
Well, I would say for the most part, I can always kind of make myself feel okay enough to be able to show up and whatnot. But like I said, I just put that in there just in case, like, I had one of these days where I had to, like, go be on IV fluids, and, that's something that would be out of my control.
Okay. And you said the last time that you were on IV was when?
I believe it was the end of October.
Okay. So you have some concerns about being on a jury.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Counsel, could we do a sidebar? Just a couple follow-up questions, all right? Do you think you'll be physically able to sit as a juror in this case?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're willing to serve?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Ng or Mr. Gray, do you have questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Ng. On behalf of Officer Potter, I have a right to ask you questions, and I'm with Mr. Gray and Amanda Montgomery. I don't want to pry into your physical condition, but I do want to ask you some follow-up questions. And I don't mean to offend you about a private matter, but we are interested in seeing how you are. Okay? It's fair to say, as I listen to you, that you feel somewhat nauseous almost every day.
Every day.
Could you come to the microphone? So I'm a little hard of hearing too.
Every day.
Okay. And that feeling of nausea sometimes results in vomiting,
Yes.
and that can happen every day.
Yes.
And you assume that if you were picked as a jury, that the feeling of nausea would not necessarily just go away,
Right.
and you would be in the courthouse listening to the jury, listening to the case, and then interrupting the trial to vomit on occasion. Would that be a fair statement?
I mean, like I said, it's out of my control. So if it's something that happens, yeah.
And your view is that it would likely happen.
I don't know. I don't just like necessarily. I feel nauseous all the time, but I don't always throw up. So.
Okay. All right. And you're having a baby in February, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've been in the ER about 6 times?
Yeah.
And that is for dehydration?
It's pretty much just because I can't stop throwing up. So.
So they put something in your arm and with a drug to stop that?
Yep.
Okay. And has the medical staff indicated that they can stop it in the future?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, is it going to happen in the future, if you know?
Yeah, it could happen in the future.
Okay. All right. So they haven't been able to control it in a sense of stopping it. They can control it at the time it happens. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, exactly. I've basically been prescribed medicine that helps me control it throughout the day.
So there's a possibility that during this trial, if you were to be selected, that at any given day you could be hospitalized.
Yep.
Okay. And that would take a day or two, or however long it would be.
About a day. It takes a few hours.
And then I assume you're wiped out after that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it takes another day to recover.
I mean, no, not necessarily, but...
And obviously this medical condition of yours is something you didn't want to have happen, but it's ongoing. Is that right?
Yes.
May I discuss the matter with the court again?
Yes.
You're going to be excused from this jury. I really hope you start feeling better through your pregnancy. Okay, so, and congratulations. I hope everything goes well, and I'm sure you're very excited about having your new baby. Okay, thank you so much. Deputy, could you hold up on bringing the another juror in? Okay, I granted the defense motion to strike for cause over the state's objection. I believe that this panel member, she did say that she's been hospitalized and that if that were to happen, she would be not able to come in that day. We can't be stopping the trial for a day while she is in the hospital needing medical attention. This is a very, I think, unusual pregnancy because of the hospitalizations and the need for getting IVs. So for that reason, I granted the defense motion to strike. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for waiting and thank you for your patience. You may remove your mask, okay? All right. I don't have very many questions for you. Thank you for coming today. Excuse me, I'm having some problems with I have your questionnaire on my computer, so. Okay, it looks like you haven't really heard very much about this case, and that you're neutral with respect to your impressions on the parties, and that you don't really have any facts, and you're going to be open-minded and listen to all the evidence then? Okay?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Now, you indicated that you were a victim of a crime, and the police were called because of a home break-in robbery. Was it one incident or two?
Boy, this was a long time ago. Maybe it was two. One or what?
Excuse me, could the juror speak up a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, the microphone's right there. Maybe you can.
I don't exactly remember. It was quite a while ago. It might have been one for sure, but we've had other times where we've had to call the police.
Okay, were you satisfied with the police response?
Yes.
Okay. Any complaints about how you were treated?
No.
All right. You stated that you were a security person at a church. What was your job?
We were called watchmen, and we went around the church during the services, making sure that everything was okay and that there weren't problems with any of the people at church, and that no people went after the pastors or the staff there.
Okay.
So we were kind of like volunteer security detail, I guess.
Okay. And did you encounter situations where you had to take control of the situation?
I did not.
Okay. In response to your views on Black Lives Matter, you indicated you were very unfavorable. Can you explain why you formed that opinion and what is the basis for that?
Well, I think they just go too far overboard. I think that everybody is equal in all ways, and so I think they go too far one way.
Can you explain what you mean by what they're doing that you think is going too far?
I think they just get too excited about being against. I don't know. They're just. I'm not sure I can explain it.
Take your time.
They just seem like they're more interested in getting on the news than really doing anything to help Black people.
Okay. So it's more the publicity that they're seeking rather than really...
I think it is.
Okay. In response to the question, have you, a family member, or someone close to you ever been employed by or had any dealings with the Hennepin County District Court, you checked yes. And that was only with respect to your guardianship, or were there other instances?
Oh, that's correct.
Okay, that's the only time you've had any dealings with the Hennepin County District Court?
I'm sorry, what?
That was the only time that you've had any dealings with Hennepin County District Court, is getting appointed a guardianship?
Well, my daughter had been arrested for, I think, DUI.
Okay.
So
And do you think that she was treated fairly?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you thought justice was done in her case, or do you have complaints about it?
No, I think justice was done. I don't have any complaints.
Okay. In response to the question, do you want to serve as a juror, you checked yes and not sure. I know that you don't really want to have to come to Minneapolis, so, and that's understandable. But your question on the questionnaire anyway, will jurors be required to be fully vaccinated? I'll answer that question for you. We don't have that requirement. You indicated, I think, that should be required. We don't require proof of vaccination. But what we do require is that masks be worn at all times while in the courthouse, and during the trial you will be required to wear a mask. And the only time that you're allowed to take your mask off is if you're in the witness box, or if you're taking a sip of water and you're sitting as a juror. Would you feel comfortable being a juror in this case under those circumstances?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that you think we should know about you and your ability to sit as a fair and impartial juror in this case?
No.
Okay. And do you think you can be fair to both sides here?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Gray?
Good afternoon. This is 32. That's your name here. You're number 32 juror. I have read your questionnaire. And would you change anything in this today?
No.
Okay. And has anything happened since you answered this questionnaire that perhaps the lawyers representing the state and representing Kim Potter should know about?
No.
You mentioned in your questionnaire, pull it out here. You say you're good as a jury deliberation as long as I have all of my medications, that I'm good. And you're asked about the medications, and you say, no, just what I listed previously. I have looked through this document twice. I missed them. Maybe I missed it, but
Well, I think I was thinking about, like, if we were sequestered or something, then I have some eye drops that I need to take. That's all.
all right, that's, but it wasn't listed. I didn't find it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I'd like to, the last question here, you want to serve as a juror, you say yes and not sure, and you mention having to go to Minneapolis is not something you look forward to, but you also realize you have a civic duty to be a juror. Is this the first time you're a juror?
Yes.
And can you handle it, even knowing, as the judge has told you, that not everybody, maybe everybody will be fully vaccinated, but it's not required. The mask is required.
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay. And you can be fair and impartial?
Yes.
Both sides?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have. We'll pass the jury, Your Honor.
Mr. Gray?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Juror 32. Thank you for bearing with us, being patient all afternoon. Appreciate it. When you indicate, as Mr. Gray asked you about not wanting to come to Minneapolis, why is that?
Because of all the violence that's been going on around the downtown areas.
Yeah. And, I know you had indicated that the community was negatively affected because of the demonstrations and things that were going on for just that same fear, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about groups, a group like Black Lives Matter taking things too far. Do you think that they're involved in that kind of violence that makes people unsafe?
Maybe. I don't know for sure.
Do you have concerns about that?
Well, after coming downtown today, I don't know, maybe I was mistaken, but I just hear things.
Yeah, and what do you mean you hear things? What kind
Well,
of
you hear things on TV about, all the shootings and stuff like that.
And the reason I ask about Black Lives Matter in that context is because when you talk about taking things too far, do you think that's the kind of things that they have taken too far?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
You said they take things too far. And
With their protesting and violence like that.
so that's kind of part of what maybe makes it not so safe in Minneapolis anymore,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
I know it's been a number of months since you filled this out, so I don't expect you to have perfect recall of everything, but there was the question that had different statements, and then you had to say whether you agreed or disagreed. Do you recall that?
Sort of.
You said that, okay, the statement is, police in my community make me feel safe, and you said you strongly agree with that.
I do.
Okay, why did you strongly agree with that, or do you?
Because, well, just recently I had a hip dislocation in my house, and they came out like almost, 10 minutes there at my house. So, I don't know, I think they do a good job.
Okay. And they do a good job of helping with, I guess, protecting you from the kind of violence that concerns you about Minneapolis.
I hope so.
Yeah. And one of the phrases was, "I do not trust the police," and you strongly disagreed with that. So you do trust them.
Yes.
You trust them to help you with medical calls.
Yes, or
violence.
whatever.
Yeah. And then one of the statements is, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make. And you agreed with that, do you recall?
Yes.
So when you agreed with that, what did you think it meant about second guessing their decisions?
Can you repeat the statement?
Yep, it's a long one and it's kind of hard to follow. So I'm glad to. Because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while on duty. And you said that you agree with that.
Well, for the most part, I guess it depends on the circumstance.
So, and I think my question would be, like, in that phrase, when you answered it, what did you take second guess to mean?
If they second guessing. Well, I guess I wouldn't want to say that the officer is unable to make a mistake, but I think that a person can be, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I thought that I knew what I meant, but maybe I didn't. I just know that if you second guess everything that a police officer does, nothing would get done, and they wouldn't be able to keep law and order, I guess.
And so it sounds like you're saying that, and I'm sorry to just keep probing you. I mean, these are the questions we have to ask, right? Because we have to have a fair and impartial jury. Not every person is right for every case, right? And that's part of why we pick juries this way.
True.
What person may be good for one case may not be for every case. So that's why I have to ask. And it sounds like, you have a lot of faith and trust in police officers because they do keep you safe, and you want it to stay that way and not sort of face this violence that sort of infecting Minneapolis.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I know you want to do your civic duty and you want to be fair. I completely understand that. But like I said, not every case. So this case obviously involves the conduct of a police officer, right? Do you think that you would, this mindset about trusting police officers and wanting to trust them and being important and not second guess them, is a sort of a bias you would take with you as a juror in this case?
Take a bias?
Yeah, and maybe bias is too strong of a word, but it's a mindset that you have that it's important that that police officers can do their jobs. You trust them. You want them to put an end to this violence. You want them to be there for you, and you're afraid that if you have to second guess what officers do, it'll keep them from doing their job.
Yes.
That's kind of the mindset you have, right?
Right.
So this case involving a police officer may not be the right case for somebody that has that mindset. Do you see what I mean?
No.
Okay. Tell me why not? If you're saying no.
I don't think I'm biased. I think I would need all the facts before I can make a decision or an opinion. That's all I know.
Okay. And maybe bias was too strong of a word even. I mean, mindset maybe? Is that something that you think you really can set aside in a case involving a police officer?
Judge, I object to this improper way here. He's questioned her now on this for 5 times.
All right, I'll let you answer the question. Do you remember it?
Pardon?
Do you remember the question that was asked? Do you want to re-ask that
Sure.
same question?
And I know these are not easy questions to answer, and we have time, so don't worry if you want to take some time to think about it. But we've been talking about this mindset, that you expressed in your answers to these questions. These are important things to you. I'm not making judgments about you at all, right? It comes down to this question of right juror, right person for the right case, right? So the way that you've answered shows that you have some strong feelings about police officers and the work they do and needing them to continue doing it by not having people second guess what they do, right? And yet as a juror, you would have to decide the facts about an officer accused of crimes because of their conduct. Do you think that you're the right juror for this case then?
I do.
Why?
Because once I get the facts, I can go through them and make a fair decision. That's all. Because I'm not one that would just willy-nilly say, okay, you're guilty or you're innocent or whatever.
And, we question you at length about this now because, of course, you have to be assured of that now, right? You can't realize later, I can't set that aside. So, you've not been on jury duty before and you've never sat on a jury, but is it that you can tell us for sure now you would not let that mindset affect your deliberations if you were a juror?
That's correct.
The objection is sustained. It's been asked and answered a number of times. Please.
May I be heard about that, please? Okay. I will move on then. I noticed that you indicated that apparently you have some experience in the Army. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, when was that?
that was in 1983, I believe.
Okay. Quite some time ago.
Yes, quite some time ago.
How long were you in?
Less than 2 years.
And was that an important part of your life then? I mean,
It was different. I didn't enjoy it all that much.
okay. And that's presumably why you got out, right?
That's correct.
And you indicated, you talked about being a watchman or security at your church. You're still doing that?
No,
Okay. When did you stop doing that?
because it was taking up too much of my time. I mean, we had to do 2 services on Sunday, and then we had to do a lot of training in between times, and it just got to be too much.
Okay. Why did the church need to have that kind of security?
I think most churches do nowadays, just because of the atmosphere of the times, I guess. But we've had them at our church for several years now.
And you do have, make sure I get this right, you do own a firearm.
I do.
And do you have a permit for it, or do you just have it at home?
I did have a permit and it expired, and I haven't renewed it.
And so you went through the training to get your permit, correct?
Well, that was part of it. We didn't have to get a we didn't have to carry, but I decided I'd like to. So
Okay. I see what you're saying. You didn't have to carry while being a watchman at the church.
well, you couldn't unless you had a permit,
Right.
but it wasn't required to have a firearm when you were on duty.
So that training you did, the firearm training, was approximately how long ago?
Oh, that's about 3-4 years ago.
And that's again another thing that, an outside the courtroom experience that you've had that you'd have to set aside to be a juror in this case. Do you understand that?
No.
Okay. So, if you received training, firearm training, there may not be evidence about that in this case. So you'd have to rely on what you hear in the courtroom and not the training that you had. Does that make sense?
No. I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're saying.
All right. When you got a permit, you went through the training class, the firearm training.
Yes.
Okay. And so you got some training there.
Yes.
Obviously, this case involves a police officer who gets training, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so, as a juror, you would be required to rely on what you hear in the courtroom about firearm training, not the training that you had.
Yes, that's true.
Can you do that?
Of course.
Okay. Mr. Gray asked you about the medications. It sounds like it's just eye drops or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So nothing that would affect your ability to concentrate in
Oh,
court.
no.
Sometimes I can't can't even read my own handwriting. But so I've asked you a lot of questions. I hope I haven't pried too much into your personal life. Is there anything about your answers that you'd want to add to or change since I asked them before?
No.
Can you excuse me just for a moment, please? Your Honor may have a moment.
Yes.
Thank you, Juror 32. Your Honor, we would exercise a peremptory.
Thank you very much for coming in. But you're excused from this jury, but I appreciate you taking all the time that you did. Have a good evening. All right, counsel, I will see you all at 8:30 so we can discuss what we discussed in chambers, okay?